The diplomatic quarters of the Intersystem Alliance station hummed with the usual sterile efficiency that Grace had come to associate with bureaucratic neutrality. She adjusted her translator chip and prepared to decline yet another contract. Mercenary work paid well, but she'd sworn off bodyguard details after the incident on Proxima 7th. Then Ezra walked in. At first, Grace thought the environmental controls had malfunctioned. Heat radiated from the figure in the doorway, not the oppressive kind, but something ancient and primal that made her human hindbrain whisper warnings about apex predators. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his scaled skin shifting between deep crimson and burnished gold in the station's artificial light. The Dracosians were rare this far into human space, and for good reason. Their homeworld had been glassed during the Harmony Wars, and the survivors scattered across the galaxy like embers from a dying fire. But it wasn't his appearance that made Grace pause. It was his eyes, reptilian slits of molten amber that held something she recognized instantly: desperation. "Please," Ezra said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating. "I need your help." Grace gestured to the chair across from her, though she doubted it would support his weight. He remained standing, his clawed hands clasped in front of him in a gesture that was almost human in its vulnerability. "I'm listening," she said. "My daughter, Kira, turns 7 cycles old in 1 week." Ezra's voice cracked slightly, smoke wisping from his nostrils, an involuntary sign of emotional distress among his kind. "Her mother died 3 years ago during a mining accident on Helios 4. Since then I've tried to give her everything, but—" He trailed off, looking away. Grace waited, recognizing the weight of words left unspoken. "The Dracosian Council has declared that I'm an unfit parent," Ezra continued. "They claim a child cannot be raised properly without a mated pair. According to our traditions, if I cannot prove I have a stable family unit by Kira's birthday, she will be taken to the communal rearing centers on New Dracos." Grace's jaw tightened. She'd heard of those places, efficient, sterile environments where children were raised according to rigid cultural protocols. They weren't cruel exactly, but they stripped away individuality in favor of conformity. For a species nearly extinct, she understood the logic, but understanding didn't mean agreeing. "Let me guess," Grace said. "You need someone to pretend to be your wife for the inspection." Ezra nodded, and for a moment his powerful frame seemed to deflate. "The inspection team arrives in 3 days. They will observe us for a week, including Kira's birthday celebration. If they believe we are a legitimate family unit, they will close the case." "Why me?" Grace asked. "Surely there are Dracosian females who—" "There are 47 Dracosians in this sector," Ezra interrupted. 12 are female. Of those, 8 are already mated, 3 are juveniles, and 1 is my sister. The remaining one reported me to the council." His claws scraped against each other, a sound like swords being sharpened. "They believe that integrating with other species dilutes our culture. That raising Kira in human space makes me a traitor to our traditions." Grace leaned back, processing this. "The HFY humanity attitude that had made humans the galaxy's most adaptable species suddenly seemed inadequate. This wasn't about human exceptionalism or proving humanity's worth. This was about a father fighting for his daughter against the crushing weight of tradition and trauma. "What's in it for me?" she asked, though she already knew her answer. 50,000 credits, Ezra said. "And my eternal debt." Grace stood, extending her hand. "Keep your credits. Just promise me you'll let Kira choose her own path when she's old enough." Ezra stared at her hand for a moment before enveloping it in his own. His scales were surprisingly smooth, radiating warmth like a banked fire. "You would do this? For no payment?" "I'm doing it because the galaxy has enough orphans," Grace said. "And because anyone who'd cross space to beg a stranger for help deserves a shot at keeping their family together." The next 3 days were a crash course in Dracosian domestic life. Grace learned that Kira loved human strawberry ice cream despite being unable to digest it properly, that she drew pictures of her mother with silver crayons on every available surface, and that she had inherited her father's fierce intelligence alongside his temper. Grace also learned that Ezra was nothing like the war stories painted his species. He was gentle with his daughter, patient with Grace's mistakes, and painfully aware of how human customs differed from his own. He taught Grace the traditional Dracosian greeting, a pressing of foreheads that symbolized trust, and how to prepare plasma root tea. which tasted like burnt copper but apparently showed respect. When the inspection team arrived, Grace was ready. She stood beside Ezra as 5 stern Dracosian officials filed into their modest habitat, their eyes cataloging every detail with clinical precision. The lead inspector, a silver-scaled female named Sherix, examined Grace with particular intensity. "A human," Sherix said, her tone carefully neutral. "Unusual." "My mate understands what family means," Ezra replied, his hand finding Grace's. "That transcends species." For 6 days they lived the charade. Grace read Kira bedtime stories about human explorers and Dracosian heroes. She helped Ezra prepare meals, their coordination improving from disastrous to merely awkward. She even learned to tolerate the habitat's temperature, which Ezra kept at a sweltering 95 degrees. On the 7th day, Kira's birthday, Grace watched the little dragon girl tear through presents with infectious joy. She wore a crown made of synthetic diamonds and human wildflowers, a fusion of 2 cultures that somehow worked. When Kira hugged Grace and whispered, "Thank you for coming to my birthday, Mama Grace," something cracked in Grace's chest. Sherix approached as the celebration wound down. "You love them," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Grace met her gaze. "Yes." The inspector's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "The council will approve this arrangement. But understand, if you leave, if this was merely performance, we will know. And we will return." "I'm not going anywhere," Grace said, surprised by how much she meant it. Sherix nodded once and departed with her team. In the sudden silence, Ezra turned to Grace, smoke curling from his nostrils. But this time it spoke of relief rather than distress. "Thank you," he said. "I know you plan to leave after plans change," Grace interrupted. She looked at Kira, who was showing her new toys to a holographic projection of her mother. "Besides, someone needs to teach her that humans make the best birthday cakes in the galaxy." Ezra's laugh was like distant thunder, warm and genuine. "Then I suppose we should start preparing for next year's celebration." Grace smiled. Across 1,000 worlds, humanity had proven its resilience, its adaptability, its refusal to be defined by limitations. But perhaps the most human thing of all was this: the ability to choose family, to see beyond scales and traditions and fear, to say you matter to someone the universe had written off. In the end, that was the real HFY moment. Not conquest or survival, but connection. And for Grace it was more than enough, and